Vanessa Claiborne, a 48-year-old black CEO, arrived at her own luxury hotel, the Oakmar Grand in Des Moines, exhausted and hoping for a quiet night. The weight of the past week pressed on her shoulders. An unexpected financial audit, a last-minute acquisition proposal, and a tense shareholder call had drained her. She craved the sanctuary of her private suite, a space she had designed herself with warm mahogany finishes, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a deep soaking tub that promised to erase the knots in her back. The hotel was more than just an investment. It was a testament to her journey, a symbol of what she had built from nothing. Dressed in understated elegance, soft leather loafers, tailored slacks, and a silk blouse the color of crushed violets. She carried only a canvas duffel, no entourage in sight. She had long since abandoned the performative trappings of wealth. No designer logos, no flashy jewelry, just the quiet confidence of a woman who knew her worth. The lobby was hushed, the scent of bergamot and cedar lingering in the air, the marble floors gleaming under the soft glow of chandeliers. A few guests lounged in velvet armchairs, sipping cocktails, their eyes flickering over her with vague curiosity before dismissing her as irrelevant. She approached the front desk, where Kayla Mendez, a 22-year-old receptionist with a sleek blonde ponytail and a practiced smile, barely glanced up from her screen. Kayla had been working at the Oakmark for 6 months, long enough to recognize the usual clientele. Wealthy white businessmen, polished socialites, the occasional celebrity. Vanessa didn't fit the mold. "We're full. Guests only," Kayla said, her tone clipped, her fingers still tapping at the keyboard. She didn't bother to meet Vanessa's eyes, already mentally categorizing her as someone who didn't belong. Maybe a lost traveler, maybe a salesperson trying their luck. Vanessa didn't react to the dismissal. She had been here before, in 100 different ways. "There's a suite reserved under the owner's block," she said evenly. Vanessa Claiborne. Kayla's manicured nails paused mid-type. Her eyes flicked up, scanning Vanessa's face, her clothes, her duffel bag. A beat of silence. Then a laugh, sharp, disbelieving. "You own the Oakmark?" The words were laced with skepticism, her lips curling into a smirk. Vanessa didn't blink. "Yes." Kayla's smirk deepened. She reached her phone, her voice dripping with condescension. "Let me just check with my manager." The assistant manager, Neil Dorrance, appeared within moments, his expression a careful mask of professionalism. Neil was in his late 30s, a career hotel man who prided himself on handling difficult situations. He took one look at Vanessa and made his assessment. His smile was tight, his posture subtly shifting into something firmer, more authoritative. 2 security guards lingered nearby, their presence unnecessary but unmistakable. "Ma'am, I understand there's been some confusion," Neil began, his tone patronizing. "But we can't just allow anyone to claim ownership of the property. There are protocols." Vanessa exhaled slowly. She had built this hotel. She knew every protocol, every policy. She could recite the employee handbook from memory. But she also knew what this was really about. It wasn't about verification. It was about the fact that she didn't look like what they expected an owner to look like. She pulled out her phone, dialed a number she knew by heart, and spoke just 2 sentences. "I've been denied access to my own property. Resolve this immediately." Then she waited. The lobby grew tense. Guests glanced over, sensing the shift in energy. The security guard shifted uncomfortably. Kayla's smirk faltered. 6 minutes later, the elevator door slid open, and 2 men rushed out. Brent Holloway, the regional VP, and Carlos Mendoza, the district manager. Brent's face was flushed, his tie slightly askew. Carlos looked like he'd sprinted from the parking lot. "Miss Claiborne," Brent gasped, out of breath. "We had no idea you were arriving tonight." Carlos shot a glare at Neil and Kayla. "Why wasn't I informed?" Kayla's face drained of color. Neil's mouth opened, then closed. Vanessa didn't raise her voice. "Suite 1200 is always reserved for me. Is it available?" "Of course," Brent said quickly. "Right this way." But Vanessa didn't move. She let the silence stretch, watching as the staff scrambled, their panic palpable. The receptionist who had dismissed her now looked like she might faint. The assistant manager who had called security was stammering apologies. The guards had melted into the background. This wasn't about the suite. It was about the moment they realized their mistake. It was about the assumptions that had led them here. Finally, she nodded. "I'll take my key." Kayla's hands shook as she processed the check-in. Neil hovered, offering to personally escort her upstairs. Vanessa declined. "I know the way." As she stepped into the elevator, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished brass doors. A black woman, tired but unbowed, holding the weight of 1,000 similar moments. The doors closed. The lobby erupted into hushed whispers behind her, and Vanessa Claiborne, owner of the Oakmark Grand, allowed herself one deep breath before the next battle began. The next morning, Vanessa met privately with Kayla and Neil in the hotel's executive conference room, a space she had designed with intention, its walls lined with artwork from Black and indigenous creators, its long table crafted from reclaimed oak. The morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the tense silence that filled the room. Kayla sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her nails, once perfectly manicured, now bitten down to the quick. Neil, usually so composed, couldn't stop adjusting his tie, his eyes darting between Vanessa and the door as if calculating an escape route. Vanessa let the silence linger, not as punishment, but to let the weight of the previous night settle between them. She had slept little, her mind replaying the encounter, the familiar sting of humiliation sharpened by the fact that it had happened in her own damn hotel. But anger wouldn't serve her here. This wasn't about retribution. It was about change. "Tell me," Vanessa began, her voice calm but unyielding. "What happened last night?" Kayla's breath hitched. She opened her mouth, closed it, then swallowed hard. I didn't realize," her voice cracked. "I didn't expect the owner to be someone like you." Vanessa arched a brow. "Someone like me?" Kayla flinched. "Black," she whispered. Neil jumped in. His words rushed. "Ms. Claiborne, this was a terrible oversight, but I assure you it won't happen again. We'll review all protocols." Vanessa held up a hand, cutting him off. "This isn't about protocols, Neil. It's about bias. The kind that makes you see a black woman in a lobby and assume she doesn't belong." She leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Do you know how many times I've been mistaken for staff in my own properties? How many times I've been handed someone else's coat, asked to fetch coffee, or told I talked too educated for the front desk?" Kayla's eyes welled with tears. Neil looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Vanessa sighed, her tone softening just a fraction. "I built these hotels so people like you, young, ambitious, eager to climb, could have opportunities one never did. But opportunity means nothing without respect. Dignity isn't a privilege you extend when it's convenient. It's the baseline." She reached into her briefcase and slid 2 folders across the table. "By this afternoon, every employee at the Oakmark will undergo mandatory inclusivity training. Not the generic HR checkbox kind. Real training. The kind that makes you uncomfortable." Neil nodded vigorously. "Of course. We'll start immediately." Vanessa wasn't finished, and I'll be adding myself to the rotation of anonymous guests at all my properties. No warning. No red carpet. I want to see how your staff treats a black woman in sweatpants carrying a duffel bag. I want them to sit in the discomfort of their assumptions, just like you did last night. Kayla wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice raw. I don't want to be that person." Vanessa studied her for a long moment. She remembered being 22, bright-eyed and desperate to prove herself in a world that kept moving the finish line. She remembered the first time a guest had snapped her fingers at her, demanding she hurry up with their bags, their tone dripping with condescension. She remembered swallowing her pride because she needed the job. "Apologies are easy," Vanessa said finally. "Change is harder, but it starts with moments like this." By noon, the hotel buzzed with nervous energy. Whispers trailed Vanessa as she walked the halls, employees ducking into doorways or suddenly finding urgent tasks to avoid her gaze. The inclusivity training had been announced, and the staff's reactions were a mixed bag, some defensive, "I'm not racist," some ashamed, a few genuinely eager to learn. Carlos, the district manager, pulled her aside. "Vanessa, This is going to ruffle feathers. Some of the senior staff are already complaining. Good, she interrupted. Let them complain. Let them squirm. If they're uncomfortable, that means it's working. Carlos hesitated. And if they quit? Vanessa didn't blink. Then we replace them with people who understand that hospitality isn't just about serving the right kind of guest. It's about serving everyone with the same respect. As she prepared to leave that evening, Kayla approached her, clutching a folded piece of paper. I wrote this for you, she stammered, pressing it into Vanessa's hand before hurrying away. Vanessa unfolded the note. In shaky handwriting, it read, "Thank you for your grace. I'll be better." She tucked it into her purse, a small but undeniable victory. At the airport, surrounded by strangers, Vanessa felt the weight of the last 24 hours settle over her. The world would keep misjudging her. Of that, she had no doubt. But she refused to carry bitterness. Only memory, only the quiet certainty of who she was. For anyone who'd ever been overlooked, her message was simple. Walking like the door was always yours. Let them wonder how they missed you. Vanessa stepped into the crisp Iowa morning, the weight of the encounter still settling in her bones like fine ash after a fire. The valet, a young black man named Marcus whose name tag she made a point to read, hurried forward her car, his posture straightening when he recognized her. "Ms. Claiborne," he said, with a nod that held more understanding than deference. She saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes, not just of her position, but of what had transpired in the lobby last night. The hotel staff grapevine had clearly done its work. She tipped him generously, pressing the bills into his palm with deliberate care. "How long have you worked here, Marcus?" 8 months, ma'am." His voice was careful, professional, but she didn't miss the way his jaw tightened slightly. Vanessa leaned against her car door, studying him. You ever have guests hand you their keys without looking at you? Assume you're just part of the scenery? Marcus hesitated, then gave a single sharp nod. She reached into her briefcase and handed him a business card. "My personal number. When you're ready for that supervisor promotion, call me." The shock on his face would have been comical if it weren't so tragic. That a simple act of belief could be so startling. The airport buzzed with its usual chaos. But Vanessa moved through security with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. TSA pre-check line. Shoes staying on, laptop already in a separate sleeve. Yet still the agent, a middle-aged white woman with a pinched mouth, pulled her aside for random screening. Vanessa smiled, not the placating one she perfected in boardrooms, but the sharp, unflinching grin her grandmother used to wear when white shopkeepers accidentally overcharge her. "Of course," she said, spreading her arms wide. "Do you need me to take off my earrings, too? Or just the ones you think look expensive?" The agent's cheeks flushed. The line behind Vanessa stirred uncomfortably. 20 minutes later, seated at her gate with a too-strong airport coffee, Vanessa watched 3 separate businessmen approach the gate agent to complain about their seating. Each was accommodated with apologetic smiles. When the black woman beside her tried the same, she was told the flight was completely full. Vanessa stood, smoothing her blazer. "Excuse me," she said to the gate agent, pitching her voice to Carrie. "I believe this woman was next in line for an upgrade. I'd like to gift her my first-class seat." The stunned silence tasted sweeter than her bitter coffee. At 30,000 feet, Vanessa finally let her shoulders relax against the headrest. Her phone buzzed, a text from Carlos. Training rollout started. 2 managers resigned. HR is panicking. She typed back with one thumb. "Good. Burn it down." The woman beside her, now sipping champagne in 2A, leaned over. "That was incredible back there. You didn't even hesitate." Vanessa studied her own reflection in the airplane window. The familiar curve of her nose, the gray just starting to silver at her temples. "Hesitation is a luxury some of us can't afford," she said quietly. The plane hit turbulence. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged. And Vanessa Claiborne, who'd built an empire despite being told she didn't belong in the lobby, much less the boardroom, closed her eyes. She dreamed of her grandmother's hands, knotted and strong, braiding her hair before kindergarten. "Walk like you own the ground beneath you, baby girl." Because one day you will. The wheels touched down in Atlanta just as dawn painted the sky in bruised purples. Vanessa's driver waited at arrivals, but she waved him off. I need to walk, she sighed. The terminal stretched before her, endless and gleaming. A janitor, black, maybe 60, pushed his cart past a group of laughing college kids who didn't move to make space. Vanessa stepped directly into their path, forcing them to part. The janitor met her eyes, nodded once. Some messages didn't need words. Epilogue. 6 months later. The Oakmart Grand's employee newsletter featured Kayla Mendez's promotion to front desk supervisor. The mandatory training now included a module designed by Marcus from Valet. And when a young black woman in ripped jeans walked into the lobby asking about the owner's suite, the new hire at reception smiled and said, "Right this way, Ms. Johnson. We've been expecting you." Vanessa watched the security feed from her office, sipping herbal tea. Outside her window, the sun set in streaks of gold and violet, the same colors as that Atlanta dawn. She picked up the phone. "Carlos, let's expand the training to all properties. And find me more janitors to promote." Some doors needed kicking open. Others just needed someone to turn the knob.